subject matter to Clif. Now, guests on the show tonight, as I just mentioned there, is Clif High, which is a part 2 at Clif. And at the end of the show, for the last 15 minutes, we're going to be speaking to a Dr. Mary Helen Hensley, who's going to be a guest on the Basis Conference with Miles Johnson and Kerry Cassidy and everybody else, plus us as well. We're going to be there. And we're going to talk to Dr. Mary Helen about what she's going to be talking about at the Basis Conference. But we have a packed show with loads of information, so you better get cracking and get a move on. So, Steve, what's the communication channels?
Okay, Mary, what's the communication channels?
The communication channels are email info@oymireland.com, by phone 046 927 1212, and you can also contact us direct through the OYM chat room.
Thank you very much, Mary. Yeah, the phone number is 046 927 1212. If you want to call in from outside the Republic of Ireland, it's 00353 469 271212. We also have all the usual links on the website, oymradio.com. You will see the links there for the Twitter, the Skype, the Facebook, the anti-social media, as we call it, and loads more besides. All the great information on the site as well. Also a link for the TuneIn radio application for your Android, your smartphone. That's there as well. It's a free app. You can listen to us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We also have the chat room as well. I want to say a big hi to everyone logged into the chat room. That's the place for asking questions for a guest this evening and for also chatting amongst yourselves. People's Internet Radio, we're also streaming there too and monitoring the chat room over there. And a big hi to everyone on PIR as well. Alan.
Brilliant stuff. Right, Steve, were you going to start us off?
Yes, I'm going to start us off. We've got some news in. Some good news, actually, for a change from RTE.ie. This was out during the week. 6 found guilty of false imprisonment.
Not guilty.
6 found not guilty. Sorry. Let's start that one again.
That was a different article.
yeah. 6 found not guilty of false imprisonment in the Jobstown trial. That was in relation to Joan Burton and the water meters. It says 6 men on trial for the false imprisonment of former Taoiseach Joan Burton and her advisor have been found not guilty by a jury at the Circuit Criminal Court. After an 8-week trial, the 11-member jury returned a unanimous verdict, having deliberated for less than 3 hours. Loud applause and cheers broke out in the court as the verdicts were announced. The charges arose from a protest in Jobstown in Tala on the 15th of November 2014. The prosecution said Miss Burton and Miss O'Connell were detained in Garda cars for up to 3 hours against their will. Defendants had all pleaded not guilty to the charges. Also, a judge pointing out that Gardaí evidence has been compromised by video evidence in a trial is frightening to Joe public if they ever end up in court and only have their word against that of a Gardaí. From what I heard during the week, yeah, it was an absolutely fantastic day. They were found not guilty. Seemingly it was kind of going against them until there was video footage from a Gardaí helicopter, and seemingly the helicopter footage showed that she wasn't actually surrounded. Her path was blocked, but she wasn't surrounded, and she could have left the vehicle at any stage. And I think that was kind of the decider. So yeah, great news.
Brilliant news, and it's a bit worrying when that happened. So all the Gardaí have perjured themselves, really, because at the end of the day, they told false evidence, and the video evidence went against what they said. So that's a bit worrying. This is the kind of society and judicial system that we're dealing with. And if you're up against a judge and you don't have video evidence, Wayne Nash as well was lucky as well. They had video evidence, and only for the video evidence, Wayne Nash would have been locked up. So it's imperative now that if anything, if there's any altercation, any connection with the Gardaí, if you have any, if you come across Gardaí or they pull you over or whatever, it'd be advisable to actually get your camera out and just record it and have a record of it, because you can't trust them. I'm sorry to say, you can't trust them in this day and age. You just can't trust them. And that's evidence to say that you can't. Right. TheGuardian.com. Now, everybody knows about the Hillsborough disaster that happened in 1989. And during the week, the actual trial of the Hillsborough disaster, 6 people, including David Duckensfield, was charged. Now, It said, officer in charge of match charged with manslaughter and ex-chief constable Sir Norman Bedison charged with misconduct. 6 people, including 2 former senior police officers, have been charged with criminal offences over the 96 deaths in the Hillsborough disaster and the alleged police cover-up that followed. David Duckenfield, the South Yorkshire officer who was in command of policing at the FA Cup semi-final between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest in 1989, has been charged with the manslaughter of 95 people. Although it said 96, the one person died 4 years later, so he couldn't be charged with that, so it's 95. The 3 of the men are all charged with doing acts with intent to prevent the course of justice for the process by which statements made by South Yorkshire Police officers on duty at Hillsborough were subsequently reviewed and changed. One of them was a solicitor. So one of these men charged was a solicitor, and they falsified information. Now, obviously, Tony Farrell, who's the ex-South Yorkshire intelligence analyst, who I've met on a few occasions for coffee down in Kells, who's familiar with all of this. I'm sure Tony will have a lot to say about it. And he was aware of things that were not mentioned in the press. And he did say to me that the top police officer of Hillsborough, actually ended up underneath the table shaking. And they were looking at him for guidance as to what to do, and he ended up on the table just shaking and not doing anything. This is what the real truth was, which didn't get out. And a lot of other things besides. So maybe there was more people that should have been charged. That was the general comment. But at least the six people charged were Hillsborough, and fair play to the Hillsborough disaster group that kept on fighting, and it wasn't just buried and put under the carpet. An awful tragedy, you know.
Absolutely. 1989, that's a long time ago, but I think we all remember it. Whether you watch football or whether you don't watch football, I think everybody remembers the tragedy, and it's about time that someone has been brought to justice. It's taken a long enough time anyway.
It is, yeah. How's your week anyway?
Yeah, my week's fine. I've a little blue book here in my pocket.
Ooh!
And you will testify it is blue.
It is blue book.
I used to have a little black book,
yeah.
but that's gone.
Is this Project Blue Book by any chance?
It is. Wow, it is Project Blue Book. I actually found this book at home. It's a funny story. My wife got this little book. It's a little notepad. And she got it for something that she was going to do and never done it. So it's been lying there ever since. So it's now mine. So I'm going to leave it there for a moment. What have I got to mention? Just three items actually. One, I did post on the chat room there for anyone who fancied a coffee, an article on naturalnews.com, a great news source, saying fecal bacteria found in Starbucks drinks. And it doesn't just name Starbucks, it names KFC and probably most any of the fast food restaurants that you go to, because the turnover is so fast in a lot of these places. Seemingly staff are not washing their hands. They all have this HACCP protocol in these establishments, and a lot of people are not washing their hands properly, and a lot of the ice is getting contaminated. It says with various different E. coli's and so on and so forth, and it is ending up in people's drinks and in their stomachs and making people sick. So be very careful if you're going into the likes of the Starbucks. Other two things I want to mention for the over 50s. I know there might be one or two of you listening this evening. It says frequent sex for seniors boosts brain power, especially if you are over 50. A study in the UK in Coventry University studied 73 people between the ages of 50 and 83. And obviously, it wanted to know about their sex, I suppose, and how often they do it, etc., etc. 28 men, 45 women were in the study. The study proved that people who were having regular relations, you're making faces at me.
I'm just wondering why my IQ dropped. That's obviously what it
was. We need to rectify that. Okay. The 046926. Anyway, So the study actually shown that the people who were engaging in regular relations, their IQ was, well, not so much their IQ, but their brain power was much better. And they're saying, they were able to. They've done some tests with them, like fluent, different kind of tests. Has your
Mrs. bought this?
Well,
have you sold it to her yet?
Not yet. Okay, but I am trying. Yes,
okay.
Yes. Hopefully she's listening at the moment. The study also studied. There was also another study of 30,000 men, and they found that regular sex also lowered their risk of prostate cancer.
Yeah, now, I did hear that.
Yeah, so the article says, put down your Sudoku and grab your missus.
Get busy.
Get busy. Okay, and the last thing I want to mention, cell phone radiation, it seems, is higher than manufacturers claim. There was a study done, a recent study, and by the Environmental Health Trust. And they say Apple, Samsung, Nokia, Motorola are the main suspects in this report. They say that the kind of the data sheet that these companies give out with their phones, and they say this is the level of radiation. Well, this company, the trust, the Environmental Health Trust, they got a lot of the phones and they done their own independent testing between, obviously, I think it's 2015 and now. And the findings are that a lot of the main kind of the brands, as mentioned, the Apple, Samsung, Nokia, Motorola, that they are up to 3 to 4 times higher than what it says on the data sheet, and that is worrying. The 2015 study also showed that children using a cell phone for just 20 minutes a day, and I think we've all seen kids, young children using cell phones, it may lead to a 3-fold increased risk in cancer tumour development in later life. So that's quite concerning as well. I mean, look, we've all seen the children using them. I, for one, don't let my children use cell phones or go anywhere near them, especially the younger ones. I'd rather see them colouring a colouring book rather than using those things. I suppose tablets are probably not as bad because they're not really emitting anything, because they're not connecting up to 3G or whatever it may be. But yeah, definitely cell phones, keep them away from your children. There we go. That's all I have to report for you this week.
Okay.
How was your week?
Right, just a couple of things before we bring Clif on. I did put up a Spooky 2 Beginner's Guide video on YouTube. So if you go over to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/OYM Internet Radio, you'll see the video there on the Spooky 2, all about the Beginner's Guide. It's just a basically Beginner's Guide. There's nothing more advanced than that. But you get an idea of the Spooky 2. It's been a long time coming. I've just been busy. But it's up there now. Now, the next thing I have to do is a tutorial on the Genius software. And we're penciling in a date and time for Dr. Ariel Policano and Ryan to come on the show and talk about the Genius software. So that's in the pipeline. Now, as Steve is talking about the dangers of cell phones, there's been a big push on 5G cell phone technology, and it's called the Internet of Everything. And they want everything to be on the internet because they want to track you in every way possible, even down to the food that you have in the fridge. So I'm pretty concerned about the health issues regarding the rollout of 5G, because crowd control devices that they have work on the same frequency, which is a bit of a concern. So we need to be considering moving away from mobile phones and maybe back to CB radio and amateur radio. Now, myself and Steve are very familiar with both because we've been involved in both and are involved in both since the 1980s. And we are very familiar with the technology, and we still use the radio side of things. We still use it on a near enough, not on a daily basis, but near enough. When I pick it up, when I get you come now to work, we have a chat. Now, I know that the CB and amateur radio technology is not as good as the mobile phone technology. It's got limited abilities, but it is lower than 300 megahertz. You can use lower than 300 megahertz. And for CB radio, you don't need a license. For amateur radio, you have to do training and get a license. But you don't have to play with CB radio and amateur radio. You don't have to pay monthly contracts, and you don't have to pay top-up fees. So keep that in mind as well. And some CB radios these days have hands-free, and some of them have Bluetooth as well. So the modern technology is coming out there with the radios. In amateur radio, you have technology like packet radio, which is an old technology, but myself and Steve have used SoScan TV to send images to each other as a bit of a test. But the new technology out there is called APRS, which is Automatic Packet Reporting System. And we have APRS in Ireland. And with APRS, it's a digital communication, but you can use under 300 megahertz to send information. And you can include Object Global Positioning System coordinates, weather station telemetry, text messaging, announcements, queries, and other telemetry. APS data can be displayed on a map which can show stations, objects, tracks of moving objects, weather stations, search and rescue data, and directional finding data. Now, if you have an Arduino, which is another possibility, maybe the Arduino can be used to set up a CB amateur radio technology device, or maybe a text-based system. I am kind of looking at the APRS as a possibility, because you're not tied to a network. You're not tied to satellites and having to link up and all that kind of stuff. And 5G is, I think that's going to be the elephant in the room. So we have to be well aware of this technology, and look at alternatives. That's what we're going to try and do anyway. We're going to play around with it and see what we can do.
I just want to say, some of the information that you've given out there, people may have tuned out, or their brain may have turned to mush, because it's very unfamiliar technology. But it doesn't have to be. It's technology that you can get your head around as simply as getting your head around a mobile phone. It's not really no more difficult. But anyone who is concerned about the 5G and is kind of interested in other forms of communication, either for permanently or just for a bit of fun, it's worthwhile checking out.
Definitely, and it's good fun. It's good technology. Right, we're going to bring our guest in. Our guest is Clif from the website halfpasthuman.com. And well, Steve, do you want to do the bio before we bring Clif in?
Yes, I'll just say, Clif is well known for his WebBot program, which he claims is able to predict future events by tracking keywords entered on the internet. It was first developed in 1997, originally to predict stock market trends. Clif, along with his associate George Ure, keep the technology and the algorithms largely secret. People can subscribe to his website to find out about the predictions his WebBot program has uncovered.
Good evening, Clif. How are you doing?
Doing just fine.
Is that bio okay for you, or anything else you want to add there?
Well, George Ure was, he was only with us for a little bit, and he did the PR stuff and didn't mess with the algorithms. Other than that, it's quite accurate, yes.
Oh, cool.
And actually, even more accurate today, because we've turned it, away from the stock markets, which are manipulated, to the, cryptocurrency world, which is not, and it's proven, itself over and over again.
Okay, well, there's a lot of issues at the moment with the cryptocurrencies, and, there's talk from a lot of kind of millionaires, billionaires actually buying up the cryptos for whatever reason. Maybe they know the financial system is a Ponzi scheme and it's going to crash anyway.
It's exactly that, whether they're doing it deliberately or simply responding to market forces. It's basically exactly that. The Ponzi scheme is collapsing. Those individuals that are spooked by this are trying to get wealth out of the Ponzi scheme in any way they can, and cryptocurrencies came along as a very nice replacement for that collapsing system at the appropriate time. And so, yeah, there's a lot of people that are trying to get large money into cryptocurrencies, and that's been causing some of the speculative bubble-like feeling as to what's going on, but it's not a bubble. We've got a situation where this current level of activity might continue for decades, for all I know, because we have a situation where the wealth that is currently circulating around the planet in the form of the debt instruments that we call money, the currency, the sovereigns, the euros, the dollars, etc., that wealth that's stored in those is getting out, and it can't transit into anything like art or gold or silver, just because there's just too much of it. And so it's transiting into something that's expansible, that can expand the cryptocurrency world. So it's going to be a very heady 20 or 30 years minimum, I would think.
I was going to say, actually, a lot of millionaires and billionaires tend to buy up things like art and maybe statues and sculptures and stuff. And they're paying ridiculous money, and people they don't understand why they're doing it. But, if you're in that game, you understand that these things like cars, luxury cars and all that, they hold their value, where if you have paper money which is valueless, then it's not worth anything. They know this, so they buy things of substantial value which will keep their value.
That's the theory, and it is held It is held up until we've crossed certain thresholds a few years back, and they're still acting on that theory that indeed, if they spend $100 million for a piece of an art today, that it'll be worth $102 million in a year and $104 million, etc. And there is this hyperinflationary component to that, because basically that's what we're all dealing with. And your average a woman who has to go shopping for food for people, she knows why the millionaire is trying to buy stuff, because she knows her paper currency is worth less. It takes more and more of it to buy the same number of eggs, the same amount of milk, etc. And so she feels that at a different level, at the consumption level. The millionaires are feeling it in the sense that they're being told by their accountants and stuff, well, you had X number of millions sitting here and it lost 7% of its purchasing value because you kept it in this currency over the last year. And so under those circumstances, they look at things like Bitcoin and some of these others that are growing in value, and the billionaire thinking, well, he's got to get out there and get in as much as he can to convert as the dollar is dying. These others are obviously the replacement system that is burgeoning. Now, his problem is different from that of the woman who's buying milk and eggs. She actually stands more of a chance of converting a significant portion of her income into cryptocurrencies than does the billionaire. The reason is that the cryptocurrencies, by their very nature, are new, and in this newness, they're small. And so trying to shove an elephant through a garden gate door is simply not going to work. But a regular-sized human can certainly open up the garden gate door and go in and out, no problem. And that's basically what is allowing the transfer of wealth that is going on at the moment in a manner that has never existed before. Because consider that in the past, if you were in one dying currency, say you were in the Reichsmark and you needed to get out, well, you'd convert your currency over to the sterling, or maybe the US dollar, or maybe the won or the yen or something like that. And so you would float it from one currency to another. Now the disease has affected all of the currencies, and so they need to get out of the sovereign issue things. That leaves them two options. To get big money moving out, you've got to buy big things and hope that those big things can be sold to someone else with big money in the future. Not necessarily a safe prospect anymore, given the expansion of the social instability and the policies and the politics and the population. Billionaires can no longer be certain that their property would be safe from seizure or from just simply being overrun by masses, as we're seeing in Europe. And so they now face the idea they need something more liquid, the idea that they can take this money with them, it can't be seized, and so on. And cryptos offer a very good opportunity to do that, but the gateways, the entries are so small that it's really put a burden on big money trying to get in.
That's interesting. While we're on the subject, there seems to be an increase of millionaires and billionaires buying lands in the likes of New Zealand and investing in the likes of silos or bunkers, underground bunkers and all this. Now, my kind of thinking on this, and I could be wrong, is that if I was in a position to be a millionaire or billionaire and somebody said it to me, there's a probably level of arrogance to some of them, and they'd probably go, oh, that's a load of rubbish. And then somebody would kind of show them some information to go, well, actually, here's the evidence. And they might go, well, listen, even if it is rubbish, what I'll do is I'll invest in getting it done anyway, just in case. And that seems to be the case. Now, I know the companies that build these, it's in their interest to actually frighten people, because that's how they make the money. The same with the antivirus companies years ago, saying, this is a virus, it's not out there, but it could be. And that was their PR for selling the software, justifying their existence. And the silo companies are probably no different. But there is an element of that going on. Have you heard anything through the pipeline as to what might be coming down the line? Rather than, I know we talk about a social breakdown, a social collapse. Anything else?
Certainly. The primary reason for the the projected issue of a social collapse has to do with what you were chatting about before I was brought on, which, if you were unaware of it, was all about energy. It was all about energy in one form or another, either the anger of the crowds, the jubilation of the people in the courtroom, or the energy of the devices, and so on, right? So this is exactly what is disturbing all of the millionaires and billionaires, energy at two levels. They know that the oil system is collapsing and we won't be able to afford our current existence 15 years from now, and we may have a massive die-off of humans if we don't do something. This is because it now costs us more in calories than we retrieve in calories when we're dealing with oil. If you eliminate the dollars and the costs in oil that are masked by currencies, and you look at the quest for oil on a British thermal unit to a British thermal unit, then it costs us more in BTUs now creating a truck and then putting gasoline in it to drive there to set up the well, all the way through the process of making the stuff, all the way through to refining it. We can no longer support our oil industry. So as a species, we're dying from an energy disease. We can't create enough effectively. And in order to support our agriculture, we need at least a 10-to-1 return. We need to get 10 barrels of oil out of the ground for every barrel we put in. And we're about down to 5 or 1 on fracking, and it's falling rapidly. And so because of that, we know our agricultural system as it stands now is doomed. It won't be able to be supported. This means all of our food sources are affected. So they think that that's going to cause social unrest and so on, and they're quite correct. However, there's also the other aspect of the energy problem that we're dealing with, and that is the strange energies from space. And they know that we're dealing with this. The billionaires that have billions pay attention to things like this. And they're aware that we have UVC, this high-intensity form of ultraviolet that's actually touching the surface of the Earth now. And never in my lifetime of 64 years has that occurred until this last year, in the last 12 months. And when it does do this, it creates all kinds of changes on the planet. And can be very deadly to humans and other life. It's such a high frequency, it can literally scorch and cause desertification because it can burn down into the surface of the soil at some level. They also know that we're not facing the kind of global warming as it has been promulgated by the political fellows, that instead we are indeed on the cusp of entering into the Ice Age. And so they're worried about the impact of this energy thing, the huge amount of population we have, and the Ice Age, and these strange energies that are coming from space. Because these strange energies are coming in, they're part of the Ice Age process. And what is actually happening is that the corona of the sun is shrinking, and it is dropping from about 5,000 degrees Kelvin to about 3,000 degrees Kelvin. But it's a misnomer to think of it as a corona, and we actually need to think of it as a plasma, very much like the plasma that's on the arc of a heliarc or a TIG, tungsten ionized gas welder. And the plasma exists because of the ionized gas coming around it and the grounding effect and the charge that is created there, the short circuit basically, and that's what our sun is. It's not a nuclear reactor. And as a result of this, when it shrinks, more of the energy that is out there that the sun is plowing up and causing as it goes through interstellar space is actually flowing around the sun to affect all of the inner planets and all of us. That's why all of the planets have been experiencing what we would think of as global warming. It has nothing to do with people driving SUVs on Mercury. Mercury was hotter because of the burst of the new energies that we got. Now we're all getting into this condition where all the planets are being impacted by these unknown energies from space, and they're also impacting us. The planets react, our Earth is reacting with more violence in the form of earthquakes, volcanoes, and more clouds as the UVC causes more precipitation, more evaporation to cause more precipitation, causing these huge rivers in the sky and all of this. All this stuff was predicted by our data sets, and it pointed to UVC in 1999. We got the first hints of that. And so I knew it was going to develop, and here we are. And so now, as humans, we are starting to react to these unknown energies from space. It's making us jittery. It's difficult on our systems. It would be the equivalent of standing around in the dreaded 5G Wi-Fi testing room, that sort of thing. And we're getting it from the sun. And people are just not recognizing this, and so they're reacting to the energies in an in a fashion that is not conscious, and therefore they feel jittery and irritable, so they take out that irritation in the form of anger when it's not really justified, and they need to look at it in a different way, because we're going to be going through these for a number of decades. And so the sane person would, or the rational being would say, hey, my mind is being affected by these unknown energies from space, and maybe I can do things about it in a specific way. And those same things could also be done, and they would help ameliorate some of the problems that we have with our existing electromagnetic radiation pollution.
Well,
sort of makes sense?
Yeah, no, totally. And I was just going to say, it's not affecting everybody, just a certain people in the population that this is affecting.
Let's explore that for a second, okay? Let's say that poor Ireland is uniquely, not uniquely, you're going to be the same as certain other areas around the Northern Hemisphere, including areas, for instance, where the Hopi Indians live in the southwest of the United States. This is because of the crystalline nature of the rock that you guys live on. And your rock is really pure crystal in a lot of different ways. And so that crystalline energy is going to react to, magnify, and impact, and maybe modify, but in this case it's going to magnify these unknown energies from space that are coming in at frequencies that we can't even really measure, but we're certainly feeling. And so that's why places like Ireland are going to get hit by this really hard. And we see certain parts of the Earth react with more intensity of, say, earthquakes, because that's the nature of how that rock is going to happen, how it's going to react, like in Japan. So in Japan, they're actually getting into sort of a calming state because the ground underneath them is reacting, excuse me, and is splitting up. Whereas the ground in your area is reflective and is magnifying these. The reason individuals are reacting differently, it goes to exactly that same issue. The rocks in them, so to speak, their mineral levels. So those people that are without the appropriate minerals that allow those cells to deal with the radiation get the impact of that radiation on the cell in a non-resonating way. So in other words, if your cell had an appropriate mineral level, and say it was selenium, and that selenium was vibrating at a certain frequency, it would take that energy that's coming on in, and that selenium would do what it does with that energy, which is dissipate it back into universe because it resonates at that same frequency. I'm not suggesting that everybody needs selenium. I'm just choosing it as an example. And so in this case, those people that didn't have an effective selenium level would find their cells were actually irritated. The organism, their body, was being harmed by the radiation having no ability to be grounded, if you will, outside of their system. But this also, there's good news to this, and that is that we're dealing with the kind of energies that may be able to be actually grounded out to some degree in some places. So we may find, for instance, that some people will feel better by simply taking their shoes off and spending 20 minutes a day, kneading their feet into the earth and the soil and the grass around them, and it will dissipate some of the energy. It may not work in all areas because of the nature of the soil at that spot.
Yeah, no, that's makes sense. I was actually doing some testing today with EMF, and I was just checking myself, the EMF that's around me here in the office. And it was quite low, just using the multimeter. I don't know whether you've seen that experiment, Steve, on
No.
YouTube. What you do is you can put an earth lead from the power supply, and you put your negative from the multimeter on the earth lead, and then you touch the positive lead and put it on AC volts, and it tells you exactly what your EMF is. And obviously, you can do different things to bring it down. Would you say as well, Clif, that it's got to do with your consciousness level as well, because it's got to do with the energy, the level you're vibrating at?
No. The reason I would say that has to do with my training, so to speak, though. See, I come from a physical, meditative environment, Zen and Vipassana. In both meditation schools, it is recognized that you can meditate all day long, but if you're sucking down coffee, you're not going to get calm. So the consciousness only has a certain degree of impact. And so trying to control these things consciously, in my opinion, while it may have some level of impact, some level of effect, I don't know that it would even be noticeable given the amount that's flooding in around the sun. This is not something you're going to be able to think your way out of, so to speak.
Yeah, because there's people around me I've seen just doing things that are against what they would normally do. And I'm thinking, what's going on there? Why are they kind of the way they are? And I'm sure the listeners to this show can kind of look around their friends and family or people they might know and go, that's not the same person. They're just being irrational. What's the negativity? What's the aggression? Obviously, this is what it's down to.
Correct. And see, you can see it in how it occurs in the brain, because the brain is actually a very crystalline structure. It's a liquid crystal antenna. And so what's going on is that as these strange energies come in from space, we're not used to dealing with them. Our brains maybe have never experienced them before. And as they come through our brain and affect our body, thoughts are thrown in different directions. So you're going to have differing kinds of thinking. But in addition to that, you're going to have different hormonal responses. This has to do with how your body is formed, so to speak, around the pancreas, the liver, and the spleen, and how those are the sources of where radiation damage occurs. So most people are unaware of this, but you could get, say you were near a nuclear reactor and you accidentally sucked in some plutonium and got the plutonium into your lungs. Certainly you would have problems from the plutonium in your lungs, but it's actually going to be the problem caused by the radioactive blood in your liver that is going to kill you. And so it's not going to be lung cancer or that sort of thing. So your liver and your spleen and your pancreas are all reacting to these energies very much as though they were working around nuclear reactors. And that's where we have to deal with that would seem to be an appropriate place to begin dealing with the various different kinds of radiation that we have to now. And even if we didn't have the stuff coming in from the sun, as you note, we've got in all this strange EMF with all the new 5G, all the Wi-Fi, and all of this to deal with. So we now have to start really looking at the human body and what it takes to make us healthy in a sea of radiation that we had not anticipated living in.
Well, Elon Musk wants to go down the AI route. And this is the intelligent dust that he's talking about. You know, it mightn't be the case that they'll actually physically have a microchip. We might be inhaling this intelligence dust from the chemtrails. And before we know it, we are programmable, or it's in our system and we can't get rid of it.
I would buy the idea that it would be in our system and we couldn't get rid of it. I don't buy the idea that it's programmable or that you can have smart dust, and here's why. Once you get down to a certain threshold of nano properties, it's impossible to send out communications to them. As radio guys, you would recognize this. The radio frequencies you're sending to try and control the dust would be so large the dust couldn't react to that level of frequency. And we would not be able to make a frequency so fine that the dust would be able to react to it. And again, the dust would have no intelligence whatsoever, no computational ability at any level at all, and thus can't react to a comprehensive command signal from anywhere. So basically, you have to have we're limited in physical size.
You there? Clif? Hello? Hello, Clif?
Hello?
Hello? Yeah, I lost you there.
Okay. Well, they didn't want me talking about this, but basically the nanodust is a fear. It's a FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's not real. We can't, as software guys, make chips below a certain size or two things occur. We can't get our commands into the chip to make it react, and even if we could, the thing heats up so much that we couldn't control the heat. Anybody that's got a SIM card or a micro SIM card in the back of their phone that has done some significant storage of information will recognize how hot these things get. So nanodust is some kind of a mind thing, but it does not exist.
But are we assuming that we're using man-made science and the man-made laws of physics? Who's to say that
there's no other physics that operate on our planet? So we know, for instance, that Victor Schauberger found a way to make an implosion engine. We also know that an implosion engine was created out of sound by Kirby in the 1800s, and that these were suppressed. We also know that you can get hypersonic flight from the implosion engine and so on. But none of these technologies get down to a level to where you can have something. It's kind of like, okay, you can make a computer really small, but the smaller you make it, the more it's going to have to just shed heat to the environment. So the more it's going to heat up, the energy requirements get really big. And once you get it down below a certain level, what's it operating on? It's certainly not operating on energy at the level of electronics, at the electron. And so if it's not operating at the electron level, we'll never be able to talk to it because we can't communicate with anything without electrons. Make sense?
Yeah, no, that does. It's just we've heard about this so-called smart dust.
Sure. And we've heard about a lot of stuff, yeah?
Yeah, so we'd have to do the research on it and look into it a bit more. Right, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We already have loads of questions coming in for you, Clif, so we might as well start on the questions and take it from there. We're going to be bouncing around, but, sure. Why not? Steve?
Okay, yeah, plenty of questions. You said earlier, Clif, about this stuff that's coming down from the sun and it's affecting the earth. I'm just wondering, what part does chemtrailing play in this? Because we were told before, or we've heard before, it has been suggested, one school of thought is that a lot of the stuff that's being sprayed with these chemtrails is to try and reflect whatever it is coming from the sun, reflect it back out into outer space, so it won't hit the earth.
I believe that that's the core reason that they're doing that. There's probably other agendas. They may be shoving other stuff in there. You may have the CIA trying weird experiments and all this kind of stuff. But I believe that at its core, it's intended to reflect these energies. So,
and essentially, chemtrailing is supposed to be a good thing, but it has potential to be a very bad thing as well.
It's both. In this universe, we can't have anything other than challenges. There's always a good aspect and a bad aspect. I actually know when they don't chemtrail here, we can jump from 46 degrees Fahrenheit in the morning to 96 degrees Fahrenheit 5 hours later, and it is a very intense white sun that we're dealing with, and that this is not good for humanity. So the removal of chemtrails, as much as I like Dane Wingington, and I understand, I've lost my ability to have solar panels here. They just simply no longer work in the Pacific Northwest. Because of the chemtrailing. But even so, even with the destruction of the forests and so on, I am uncertain at this point that the stopping of them would be a good thing.
Yeah, we just talking about the white sun, we spoke about that, I think it may have been last year. We all used to remember the orange sun, and all of a sudden then the orange sun was white. And completely different thing altogether. We have a question from PIR chat room. It says, Is it human? I'm going to read this as it is. Maybe it might make sense. Is it human will and intelligence / consciousness that is creating the effects that we are experiencing from the mineral and cosmic dimension?
Certainly. Is that consciously controllable? That would be the question. Not enough people, I believe, would benefit or would be able to do that to benefit. But certainly at that level, everything we experience in reality is entirely subjective, 100% entirely internal. There is no such thing as external reality. Therefore, it all is being manifest and decoded at that conscious level.
So being that it's subjective means that we're creating our own consciousness. We're creating what we see on our life through that.
Yes, but here's the rub, Guy. When you say we're creating, you're quite right. But you're only 1/3 of what you think you are. So you got 2 other thirds up there that are deciding what you need, and so you may be deciding what you want, and you don't get that, and that's why.
Okay.
Because see, you're living in. You think you reside in your body. Your body actually resides. Your physical corpus actually resides inside your consciousness. That consciousness is so large it can't be shoved into your body. There's 2 other major components of it. You have a knowing mind and a thinking mind, and you're living in what we call the body mind or the body feeling mind. This 1/3 of it. So those other components are going to give you the experience that you require, not what you in this 1/3 isolation feel that you need or want.
A friend of mine said this, and I thought it was quite profound and probably close to the mark. She said to me that it's like we're in, you remember the game Sim City?
Never played it.
Okay.
But I understand the concept.
You understand the concept. So you create life, basically, and you're in Sim City, and you create the industries and the schools and everything else, and you have to manage the whole kind of structure of society. And it's like our higher self is running a Sim City, and we are the people in the Sims.
Exactly. Exactly so. Very fitting indeed, yes.
Yeah,
we have about as much control.
yeah, exactly. I thought that was a good analogy. It's very good. Steve?
Okay, a question from Graham. Is Cliff aware of Mike Montagne's MPE, the mathematically perfected economy?
No, I haven't. I'm not aware. No.
Okay, it's basically...
And actually, I would argue that anything that comes out of a single individual is less than what we can come up with collectively, and a mathematically perfected economy won't do humans any good because we've got to be messy in order to progress.
Right, okay, so we need the yin and the yang, so to speak.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, that's how we learn. I mean, if life was easy, then we wouldn't really be learning, I suppose. It's just sometimes the negative side can be very negative, and the experiences can be harrowing and pretty bad. That's the only problem.
No, that's okay. So those things are true, but let's examine the idea that everything that we experience is 100% subjective. Okay, that there is in fact no external reality, that we're bound by whatever our senses funnel into us. Okay, yeah. I dispute David Icke, and I think we only have 4 senses, and they're defined by sensory organs, and they're all within our cranium. But other than that, I'm pretty much in line with a lot of the stuff that he says. If that is the case, then the suffering that we feel is obviously something we need because we're causing it. It's obviously something that's in our control. It's obviously something that we're participating in as an active person. And so thus we come to Buddha's argument, and also the argument for all the Zen and the other meditations, whereas you, as the ultimate subjective experiencer, provide the experience that you're going through because you need to do it. Therefore, at any time, should your consciousness decide to wake up, it can decide to thereafter consciously direct the experience and see what happens. And you can indeed do that, and that is the secret that Napoleon Hill and all of these people, make yourself rich by thinking, think and grow rich, all of these kind of things. It is all 100% accurate, and that is why we're here. Now, many people are not able to think their way out of things, and much of it has to do with the situation they've gotten themselves into, but also, from my understanding of how things work, the more we take care of our bodies and provide it what it needs, then the less we have that impinging on our consciousness and drawing us away from making these appropriate decisions.
So, another way of saying it to a certain extent, well, it depends on how your outlook on life is and your spirituality, but some people would say we had a soul contract and we've come down here to learn lessons, and part of this is maybe our subjective approach to life, and the things that are happening have been preordained.
You could think of it that way, and that's certainly valid in any given life, okay? But that presupposes you're only examining one life, and that's it, and you're done. If you were to look at it from another perspective of life after life after life, then it still pertains, but you have to give it a broader scope. And so preordained becomes not individual minutia, but rather the path you're on. And thus one could decide to walk in this life, or to run in another life, or to just simply sit in another life after that, relative to that path. And I actually think that that's much more akin to what's going on. And that gives us great power. It also, though, presupposes certain things, and then if we look around, we can find some of these things do exist. So if that were the case, then one could say that, is all time the same? Are all time experiences potentially filled with X amount of suffering, no matter what time I happen to incarnate in? And no, that's not true. And so one might then say, oh, look, because we're in a period of great suffering, we know that the next stage will not be so, simply because of the way that universe operates with oscillation. And so so then we can actually even confirm that we're coming out of the Iron Age and about to go into the Silver Age. Make sense?
Yeah.
Because there's so much suffering here, and it just naturally follows. And so we can take, actually, to a certain extent, one can take a measure of energy and growth out of the suffering itself.
Well, isn't there this kind of cycle, like a 26,000-year cycle, that we are actually on the up at the moment? We're going into the age of Aquarius. So the next 1,000 years or 26,000 years, we're going to be going into a nice area where that's all going to change, and we're going to be all, love and light and everything else. And then when that hits the peak of the 26,000, then it starts going down again, and then we go back into the dark ages, and then the whole cycle repeats again.
Yeah, I'd go along with that, except for the love and light business, because I think humans are always full of contention, and we're always going to be interacting based on our hormones, and there is no such thing as ascension and that sort of thing, and that we're basically sort of raspy critters, and the universe will provide us with the raspiness we need to continually to grow, and that there is no growth without irritation. If you've got an amoeba in a dish, it doesn't move if all the conditions are perfect.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Well, again, part of the spiritual belief for some people is that we have a kind of soul contract. We've come down here in this life to learn certain lessons, but we do have free will. And free will changes our dimensional path on what we go on, because we can choose to make a decision that might affect something for the rest of our life, or else we might choose not to do that. But there's all these kind of roads side by side, or dimensions side by side, and our free will determines which dimension we go down. But regardless of the dimension we choose, there are still lessons down there, that things that we have agreed to learn in that life. How would you?
I would go along with that 100%. We have to define the soul, though, because I don't have I can actually define it very precisely. And so the soul can't be lost. It can't be traded away. It's not what I am. It's an unconscious, it's conscious of itself as itself, but it's not conscious beyond that. And it is the repository, the database, if you will, of all of the things that I learn in this life. And then when I go into the metempsychoses, which is that period after the death barrier, in that period of time, the soul is cleansed. It's a template. And so all the stuff that is learned is like distilled down into a thick syrupy mass, a crystalline bit of intuition I take into my next life. And so whenever I get an intuition hint in this life, I know that that's something I learned in my last life, saying, hey, don't do this. I did that enough. You don't have to do it again this life. And I don't do that. Or I do that based on whatever the intuition guides. And that's where intuition comes from. So I can define all of that, and I agree with you 100%. I just provide it across a larger canvas, which is life after life after life. And the soul, its point, its purpose, its reason for existence is to bring over those things from life after life after life for me. And that's that. And so it doesn't dominate me. It's not me. It's just a different way of thinking about things. But you take a turn and you decide, no, I won't do that this life. And from that point on, everything changes for you. Well, it also changes for the next lives thereafter. It's this old saying in Vipassana meditation. It's like, let's see, it's before enlightenment, all is chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, all is chop wood, carry water, do dishes, sweep floors, and so on and so on and so on. And it makes no difference. That's the beauty of this saying, is once you've reached a certain point, you realize it's 100% true and it doesn't matter at all.
So you have to climb the hill to actually go down the hill.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's another belief as well out there that, some people, we talk about soul contracts and energy, and some people will say, God, that person, they had a great life, they had it very easy, and they died, and that was it. And other people have a really, really hard, extreme life. And there is a certain belief, on the spiritual side, that depending on the life you're going to come into, a part of the soul contract will depend on how much energy you're given. So if you're going to have a hard life, you'll never get 100% of your higher self, because the physical body can't deal with that. So if you're going to have a hard life, you might get about 70%. But if you're going to have a fairly easy life, then you might only get about 30 or 40%.
I don't see it that way, because of the way that energy works. It's you can actually, if you wanted to sit down and do the math, you can to some extent do the calculus for the energies involved in life based off this thing called Avogadro's number, which is related to how you measure a gram molecular weight of any given element. So you can use this as like your basis for doing math, and you can see that every life, the potential for energy is essentially the same at the key or the life force level. So that I would not accept at all, but I do understand that some people have easy lives and so on. And again, it doesn't relate in my understanding to this life per se. It relates to the metempsychoses. So the metempsychosis is that period of time and the thoughts and everything that occur to you after death and before your next life. During that period of time, there is what we can think of as a sleep or a rest, where you recover and if you will, just don't do anything, just rest from all of the integration of all the stuff you've learned in this life. And during that period, that's of a different length. So, for instance, Hitler's got a lot of stuff to integrate, so that guy might have to rest for 10 or 20,000 years for all anybody knows, right? And so somebody who's very young-souled, as they say in some of the traditions here, or young as a human is really what the term is, they might have a very easy life and then a very quick rest and reincarnate maybe within a generation, as opposed to several thousands of years. But those people that are great in the planet, David Bowie, he needs a decent rest, and so he might not be back for a couple of thousand years. And it depends not on good or bad, but the amount of ki you put out into the world and take back in. And so someone who has a nice, easy life, who doesn't face strife, who doesn't have to exhibit really huge levels of intestinal fortitude and put out that energy, they don't have to rest so much. And I think it's more that kind of a mechanism.
Yeah, I can understand that. Two books that I did read in the past, Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls, and it was they're written by Dr. Michael Newton, and he talks about the superconscious, which is the space between your past life and your current life. So before you reincarnate and you die from your past life, in that gap is your superconscious. And he did regressional therapy on people in the books, and he talks about past lives and the lessons you have to learn and what you're talking about, and the resting period and what happens with that. Again, a fascinating subject. We could talk all night on that alone, but I know we've more questions coming in and people want to bounce around and talk about other subjects. So let's touch base on Antarctica. What's the update at the moment with that? There's a lot of activity over there, down there in Antarctica. A lot of people going down, astronauts, religious people. There's something major going on down there. What have you heard, Clif?
Well, there's something major going on, and it's not the really famous people going down there now that's got me intrigued. It's the quantity of just regular guys going down and all the different kinds of jobs they're trying to get filled for Antarctica. Bearing in mind that right now it's the winter season down there, and it's usually a period of time they don't hire at all. But for the past 2 years, the quote Antarctic season is now basically 12 months out of the year. And so there have been more jobs posted this last month than existed the month before. And this means we're looking at basically a boom town kind of an environment going on down there. They're actually trucking down more supplies in the wintertime than has ever been done before. So they're just trying to support a build-out of some form. So now we're into a period where, like I say, I'm less interested in the Newt Gingriches and these kind of people going down and paddling around than I am by the Leidos, the corporation, and what they're doing, and by the 7 ships that were sent down to bring supplies to these bases in anticipation of new people arriving. And if you want to get on and look, there's lots of agencies that provide satellite photos, many of which have overlaps. Some of the overlaps are not blurred out. And you can see that there's very, very large bases and very large habitation in Antarctica, and it's not a couple of isolated little science stations here and there. In some areas, it looks as though maybe several thousand miles of the coast between these large areas are in constant use with what we might think of as like built-on ice freeways. Lots of vehicles going. We don't get to see the vehicles so much because of the satellite photos, but you can see that these are very clearly marked roadways that have what look to be permanent or semi-permanent light markers for night driving. And so somebody's doing a lot of activity down there, a lot of energy going into the place. At this point, I have an issue because of the pollution that hit my data sets from the whole Corey Good phenomenon, and I'm cleaning that out for another report in September, and I hope to have a different view of things that's a bit cleaner then. But just on the trackable material that's going down to Antarctica, we have to wonder why, in this global economic malaise, all these corporations are hiring as fast as they are able in such a wide range of occupations for such a place on the planet.
Yeah, why? What's down there? That's the thing.
Whatever it is, it's underground. We know that. Okay, we can actually make a lot of conclusions that are probably fairly sound based on what's going down there, because we see that there's a lot of excavation kind of equipment going down, and it's not so much what one would think of as the big D8 cats or the Caterpillar kind of a road pusher, road builder kind of material, but rather it's excavators. And some of them are rather specialized excavators, the kind that are used, for instance, in coal mines, that are, a certain height and so on. So whatever the corporations are seeking, they're not seeking it on the surface. There are some indications that the swap over is being made to some other energy source down there because of what they're buying. It looks as though someone's setting up a big coal plant. And as opposed to in the past, the goal had been to provide all the energy for Antarctica off of these nuclear reactors. And in the 70s, the United States had sent a couple of these small little nukes down there and had problems with them. And at first I thought that was the case, that, it was because they had problems with them that they were setting up this big coal burning operation. But now I think maybe they just need the electricity, and so they're getting more open about what they're doing. But from what I've been able to look at in manifests, it looked like somebody's building a big coal-burning electric generation plant down there.
Yeah, well, there are kind of speculation as does they might have come across a certain race, either frozen or alive, and technology down there.
That's right, the Atlanteans we heard, wasn't it?
Yeah, but see, here's the problem, guys. A lot of that came out of the Corey Good stuff, okay? My data sets had certain emotional levels that were in there, and the data sets were polluted by this marketing effort that is around this guy by the name of Corey Good, who's claiming to be a time-traveling secret space participant. He's not saying he flew spaceships, but he worked in them and that kind of thing. And it's a bogus story. It is all fake. And there's this big marketing effort around it. And a lot of the stuff in the last, since his emergence on the scene in 2015, since then we have to assume that anything that's come out around these subjects has to be re-examined in great detail because it's all polluted by these lies. And this would include all the stuff from Michael Salla and the cohorts that are working with David Wilcock and Corey Good. And so we have to now instantly throw away anything that Pete Peterson says, anything that David Wilcock says, because it is all, it's not suspect, it is all corrupted, it's all contaminated, it's all radioactive as far as I'm concerned. And then we have to start all over. So there is something going on, it is underground, and I don't think we can really speculate much beyond that until we get a new witness that's able to provide evidence as opposed to basic speculation and excrement.
I'm glad you mentioned the alternative media, because we've been told that 75% of the alternative media is either controlled or paid off. And I suppose people like Alex Jones, I don't listen to Alex Jones at all these days whatsoever. If I do, I'll definitely keep a very open mind on what he says. And there is more and more people in the alternative media coming out and being exposed. And when you look into their background, they're looking who they're involved with. And I know I've watched one of your 2-year reports, all right, and you have mentioned Corey and David Wilcox, all right. Maybe there was one time a few years ago that you could kind of go with the information that came out, say, from David. But, David's been on the show a couple of times on OYM, and maybe he's just been compromised in some way, and now the information that he comes out with is not exactly what should be brought out.
I think that that's the case. We could just be charitable and say that he's not paid off or anything. He's just a victim. Okay. I don't like victimhood or any of that, but he could have been conned by the people that are around Corey Good and the whole organization. Someone is obviously working a con, working a game, in the sense that I can't see why anybody would give Corey Good the airtime that he had on Gaiam. So right now I'm really wondering what's going on in that organization. I actually don't think anymore that it was Jay Widener that was associated with it, because now I've come to find out that Jay Widener was out and about with all these mummies and stuff. And so he probably was not participating in any of this Corey Good stuff at that level. He may have had some peripheral part of it, I don't know. But somebody was obviously attempting to push an agenda, and it caused me problems and a lot of other people, and we've run into these issues. Whether David Wilcock was, in some way compromised or simply was a useful tool I'm willing to say he was simply a useful tool. I don't think he was, had any participation at that level, if you will.
Well, there was that incident a few years ago where he came on live and said his life was threatened, and Kerry Cassidy spoke to somebody yeah.
I say stuff like that happens all the time. I get death threats all the time. Doesn't bother me a bit. Maybe it seriously bothered him. He's not the same kind of guy I am, right?
Yeah.
I like fighting. I'm covered with scars. I enjoy it. I get something out of it. And so he may not. And I think he was very deliberately, or he was indeed expressing his fear. I don't think that was fake at all. Now, whether it was accurate or any of that is immaterial.
Yeah, yeah. And, of course, being involved in the alternative media, it's just, things like that do happen. That's the way it is.
Well, we can go back to your first statement there, if we could, where you said that 75% of the alternative media was compromised and so on. I don't actually buy that at all. I would easily say 75% of the alternative media is not to be listened to, or only listened to when you want a good chuckle. And that has nothing to do with being disinfo agents or being paid by any of the evil deep state or anything.
Yeah.
It's just the way humans are. We get all whipped up about stuff that we have no real knowledge of, and we go with it, and one thing leads to another, and then Bob's your uncle. Next thing you know, you're mega fabulous on the internet, and you've got a story to maintain, and what are you going to do?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And the thing is, what we've learned over the years, this is why we call our radio show Open Your Mind. Open your mind as in Aristotle, where you entertain the thought. It doesn't mean you have to accept it, but you entertain it and go, okay, how real is that? Okay, I'm going to go do the research and check it out, and go down the rabbit hole and check it out and see what's down there, rather than just accept it for real. And we've heard stories, and we've been told stuff over the years, and that we found out it was bogus, as you say. But sometimes you have to go down the rabbit hole to check it out, and then come back up and go, okay, that was a waste of time, but it had to be done.
Oh, that was my mistake. I was supposed to come back up.
Exactly. Yeah, you have to make sure you come back up and don't stay down there. Exactly. Well, we just entertain the information, and at the end of the day, I would say, if you can't feel it, touch it, smell it, and taste it, but even then, you can still be fooled.
Wonder.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. I agree that never truer words.
Yeah, it's just, and you have to question yourself, and that's their plan, is that you start questioning yourself and your own kind of logical approach to things, because there's so much. They obviously, that when they realised how much potential the internet had for putting disinformation out there, as John Irwin said to us, who's a super soldier, said, when you bury the truth in a barrel full of lies, it's very hard to find it. And the whole idea of that, we'll give you 50% truth, 50% fake information, and then you have to try and decipher that and what resonates with you. And sometimes, it is hard. And when we get, on a daily basis, we get information in and see posts on Facebook and all that kind of stuff. And you have to ask yourself sometimes, well, is that real or is that fake? So it is getting very difficult to separate, out what is truth and what is fiction. But I suppose we're getting a bit better at it.
But we
have to.
Yeah.
They've given us so much.
How I view it, though, is, sometimes there is a lot of truth and there are a lot of lies. But sometimes the way I see it is, there's so much there that we have to trawl through that. It's like, you ever see it in some of those cartoons where someone is running, and they're trying to get to a point that's maybe 20 feet away, but they're running, and they seem to be going forever, and they're running in sludge, and it's just slowing them down. I think that's how it is with a lot of, okay, there are truths there that we should know, but there are so many people who don't want us to know those truths, and they're putting loads of crap in our way just to slow us down, and we're so busy going down rabbit holes a lot of the time, that I don't know.
No, I get you.
We do?
I get you. I understand. It's frustrating, and
Yeah.
it's as though you're playing their game.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you start wondering, is there a bigger hand further back manipulating the game itself? It makes so much sense that indeed that's the case. They're putting out all of these stories, preventing us from finding these things, and then they even go to the trouble of preloading our brains with images, such that they can trigger those images and those images are put there from all the media, from the movies and all of this kind of stuff. And then they trigger those images, and they can at any time do this, such that with the language, they can cause these images to pop up into our heads because humans are energy conserving machines. And if our brain has a preformed image that reacts to certain words, it will pop it up rather than try and come up with a deeper connotation simply to save us the energy because it wants us to survive. And the more you save energy, the more the organism has a chance to survive. And so the bad guys take advantage of this. And you've got to constantly check yourself. This is why I like both Zen and Vipassana as meditations, because if you do Zen, you don't ever stop. It's not like you're only doing it when you're sitting. And the Vipassana is the householder meditation, and that's probably the most powerful on the planet. And it's only to the outside observer that the householder appears to be occupied by his tasks. And at that point, you've so examined your mind that you can say, yeah, this was inbuilt. Someone put this image in there. And then you can say, I wonder why.
I'll have to look into them, because I do a lot of household tasks. I'll have to include the meditation into that, or just look busy. But
yeah, there you go. The same difference.
Yeah. No, you have to. You're right. You have to kind of question, and that's the thing. There's so much disinformation out there. You're going on and questioning, and all we're trying to do, as much as we can, is find the truth. But that's so hard to actually, so hard to find. And I know there's people at the top, like in that, A Few Good Men with Tom Cruise, where he says to who's the actor, Jack Nicholson,
Nicholson.
Jack Nicholson, I want the truth, and he says you can't handle the truth. Are we able to handle the truth if they tell us?
No, unfortunately, that's the case. 75% of the population, in my estimation, is unable to have an open mind, and that is not in any way to diminish or denigrate them. What it is actually something I've observed over time, and that is that to have an open mind, one actually has to take in a concept and model it. In order to model it, you have to enfold it in a temporary fashion, if you will, into your worldview and say, what would my worldview look like if I accepted X, Y, Z as being true? And I found that perhaps 75% of the population is actually incapable of that task. They think they have an open mind, but they are incapable of taking in information, modeling it, and then deciding if it would work for them and extruding it if it does not. And if it does work, they would then integrate it in. And so such an open mind at any point, obviously, you can take information that you assumed was valid in the past, and if new circumstances present themselves, you can throw that information away. You find that most people don't change, and these two conditions would be required for someone to actually change their character. Thus, we find people that, get into and exhibit a certain habitual pattern are likely to continue into that pattern because their mind is actually not capable of being open to what's going on. They're not able to take in a new thing and say, okay, what if I do stop lying and stealing? What will happen? And it just doesn't ever enter into their mind that they could integrate that into their worldview. So unfortunately, I'm sorry, I think that's just the way it is with our fellow humans, and that those of us that are able to do this, it's our job to watch out for everybody else, because we're able to say, I think that baboon or that lion is going to exhibit a behavior I've never seen before. Maybe I'd better get that baby out of there right now.
Well, it's funny you should say that, and I totally agree with what you say. Myself and Steve have put together what we call a fluid belief system. And that's exactly what you said. It's about challenging your belief system. What you know today is what you know. Tomorrow you might learn something different that challenges what you know, and just be fluid and change to the new information that comes in. But a lot of people who believe they have an open mind, when you challenge their belief system, sometimes the belief system can be set in stone and sometimes it can be fluid. And say some people who might be religious might, when you kind of challenge their belief system regarding religion, it's set in stone and they won't change it, and that's what they believe and that's it. And as you say, it's the cognitive dissonance, because their life will change if that is real. If we tell them something that goes against what they believe, if we turned around and said, by the way, there's no such thing as Jesus, it was all made up, and they're religious people, the world will probably fall apart. So they just don't want to know. They can't deal with that. I can't deal with that, so I'm going to shut that down, and that's it. And this is why...
And that's legitimate, too. You've got to give them that. That's a very well-supported... Yeah, it's a well-supported way to go through life, and it works. And so if someone is that way, I certainly would never attempt to try and push on them anymore. Like over here in the United States, we have this state called Missouri, and it's the show me state, and they have all of these sayings. And my father was from that state. He always used to say, you just can't teach that pig to sing. You didn't go to work, and you're just going to irritate the pig.
Yeah, no, totally. And the whole idea, and some people are better left. Don't approach them, don't try and wake them up, because they'd be a danger to themselves and other people if they actually realised what was going on.
And if you've encountered this, you'll know it, because this was at the point at which you suddenly discovered yourself in a fluid environment in which you assume you're going to be changing it tomorrow, and in fact, if you don't, you're going to start questioning yourself, but then you start losing all of the people that you knew that were your friends and, close relatives and stuff that you used to be able to talk to about normal stuff.
This is it. We're doing the Basis conference in September, and this is what we're going to be talking about, the whole waking up process and the fluid belief system. Because what happens is you do change. When you start challenging what you believe, you stop watching the TV programs, you maybe stop seeing people that you get on with, because now you don't get on with them because our belief systems are completely different. And it's just amazing how the whole process works. And myself and Steve have gone through this and analysed it. And as I say, we're doing a presentation in September at the conference, and we're going to be talking about this. And for some people, what's really worse as well, though? People who are in the alternative media who will turn around to you and tell you they have an open mind. But when you give them information, they won't even entertain it. They'll close down.
Because of their niche. Because of their niche in that media, yeah. They're as dogmatic as anybody else just about their blue chickens. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's the difficult part. So trying to wake somebody up who apparently is supposed to be awake is even harder than waking somebody up who's not awake.
I would agree with you, and that's why, to a certain extent, I don't like conference kind of things anyway, having been forced into too many of them in a business environment. But the thing there is, you're going to be gathering like minds, and that's not necessarily a good thing. There's no debate, no openness, no challenge to the system. It's a contented little kettle, steaming away all to itself.
Yeah. Well, we're doing the conference as we've been asked to do it, and I'm sure it's going to be good fun anyway. We're going to be meeting, a number of people there, and the whole idea is to not so much, see, one of the things we talk about with the waking up process, but I think what we also have to do as human beings is that we have to move from the teenage mind to the adult mind. The teenage mind is the ego and ignorance, and the adult mind is the wisdom and humility. And when society gets to wisdom and humility...
No, sorry about that. I would disagree. I would say you've made a big error in assumption there, and I would agree with the first part, that we've got to get out of the teenage mind, and I would agree that it's all wrapped up. But I would say that teenage is far less... I don't buy in the concept of ego. That comes from Shlomo Freud, and he was wrong about that. But the hormones of the teenager, we've got to become an adult. The transition between a teenager and an adult is not wisdom, because an adult does not have wisdom as much as they may strive to learn it. What they do have, though, that is different from a teenager is simply one thing, and that's responsibility.
Okay, so responsible for your actions. Your own actions.
And everybody else is around you as well, to some extent, or at least to cleaning up the messes, right? You're not responsible for how they feel and that kind of thing, but you are responsible for dealing with your immediate environment in a factual way. And there's also a difference between facts and truth. Someone comes to me and says, "Let me tell you my truth." I say, "No, I don't give a damn about your truth. tell me some facts, and then we got something we can discuss. Truth is your emotions that are hooked onto a fact, whether it's valid or not.
So what we are really talking about is common law. Because common law, harm, loss, or injury, basically, you taking responsibility for yourself and the people around you, and being responsible for your actions. Like, again, see, I do talk about this kind of teenage mind and the adult mind. The person who goes out and he goes into a bar and he has 6 points and he says, right, I'm okay to drive. I drive better with 6 points, and he gets in the car and he could either harm himself or somebody else. For me, that's the teenage mind. The adult mind is no, I've had a drink, I'll leave the car here and I'll get a taxi home, or get a lift home and I'll pick up the car in the morning. That's the adult mind for me.
I would agree that it is a question of you, as an adult, you recognize your presence and the harm it could do, as well as potentially any good, but you first have to guard against that harm. You have to be in the ahimsa, or do no harm mind. And I would certainly agree with that, because you're not doing you have the bravado and all of that. Where does that come from? It comes from the hormones, not from thinking, but from reacting to the hormones.
Right, okay, that's it. That's bang on. We have more questions for you there, Steve.
Yes, we certainly do. Where we go? We'll go with Dave. Dave said, I have a question for Clif. What if the smart dust, when we spoke about this earlier, what if the smart dust responds to or is activated by scalar longitudinal waves? The EMF transverse waves of telecom masts are not required.
That would be accurate, but in our reality, we as humans are unable to make something that is smaller than the electron, that would then still respond to a scalar wave. Everything we build has to begin at least the electron level, because that's the smallest thing we've got that responds to the scalar wave in any way, shape, or form. So we're again back to size limitation. There's no way to get command and control instructions to something that small, even if that thing could take along with it some form of rudimentary firmware.
What if there was some, I'm going out on a limb here, but what if there was some extraterrestrial type technology that could?
Well, see, here's the thing. Extraterrestrial, you're going to say, okay, it violates the level of physics. Well, my level of physics is very open. I understand a lot of what Tesla was talking about and so on. I understand the nature of energy at a level most people do not. And regardless of where these extraterrestrials come from, they would have to be subjected to what I call the ever-present now. The ever-present now is the aggregation of time as it comes into the universe, into our materium here. And so that is the finite limitation on everything. It's 22 trillion times a second pulse, so there is nothing. Our materium is created at its base level by this pulse, and therefore that forms how energy works. So the aliens could come from the Pleiades for all I care, but they're still going to be dealing with the electron as the limitation for the passing of command and control instructions. There's no way to engineer something finer than that. And Kozyrev proved this with his many experiments over 20 years, in which he proved we could alter time, and we could even alter life within time, and that the ultimate level of perception or reaction to time is what we laughingly call the electron, which is not solid matter, but is the nexus of these energies that are occurring at 22 trillion times a second, or about 3.4 times Avogadro's number.
I won't even claim to have understand half of what you said there, Clif. It's obviously all very, very highly technical, and I'm sorry.
Well, look at it this way. Okay? Say that a scalar wave was the ability to disturb grains of sand on a beach. And we could look and we could see the sand being disturbed, even if we couldn't see what was causing the disturbance, right?
Yeah.
But no matter what, if it was any smaller than a grain of sand, it wouldn't react. And therefore, that is our limitation, that no matter what the size of the scalar wave, how its amplitude or frequency, if it can't be reacting in the grain of sand, we'll never see it. It's beyond our scope. And so we couldn't manipulate it if we tried, nor could a space alien. They're going to be, if their bodies are not composed of electrons, they are not going, and matter as we understand it, they are not going, they may, if it's not composed of that, they may well be able to manipulate a smart dust, but they would never create a smart dust because their bodies are not made of solid matter.
Okay. That kind of makes it a little bit simpler for me, and hopefully anyone else who was kind of in my shoes and didn't understand. I'll move on with the questions. Let's
divert for a half second.
Okay, yeah.
Sure, just into the idea of the smart dust itself and why it's out there. Who put it out there? And it's all tied up to this idea of fear of AI.
Yeah.
And what is AI? Supposedly artificial intelligence. Well, we have expert systems now in software that everybody in the software marketing world is calling AI, but it's not artificial intelligence. It's not intelligent. It's just software code that runs in a predetermined fashion. There is no such thing as artificial intelligence on this planet in the hands of the military or anybody else, and there's no such thing as a self-aware computer, nor can there ever be, because there is no self there to become aware of. So a computer would have to have hormones, it would have to have sensors that it felt at risk, it would have to have a computer would not, for instance, feel a need for self-preservation even if it's programmed into it. It could not tell, for instance, that the electrical plug you're about to kick out of the wall is its lifeblood. It would have no way of knowing that. And it has no sensor apparatus or any of this kind of stuff. So this fiction was created by someone that wanted us to be afraid of AI, smart computers, and all of this kind of thing. So I have to wonder why. And the people that are promulgating it are not doing anybody a service without examining these thoughts. If you can't show me an AI, it does not exist. There is no smart dust because nobody has ever had any evidence of it. There's no evidence of any blue avians because nobody has any evidence of it. Or they don't exist because we don't have any evidence of it here. And if we don't have evidence of it, then it's speculation and deserves to be considered as simple speculation. So to talk about the dust as though it exists, or even AI as though it exists, is more than a marketing ploy, is going down a hole that someone wants us to go down. And I don't usually. Just because they want me to.
It's just funny that Elon Musk is talking about AI, but then again, he's obviously talking about it for a reason.
Mm-hmm. What are the things they're not talking about? Ask yourself that. They're out there talking about AI. Are they saying shit about, excuse my language, about CERN? Are they saying anything at all about quantum computers? No.
D-wave computers, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, we did touch base on D-wave there a couple of shows back. We're talking to Mick about it as well. One in Geneva, and I forget where the second one was. I think they have two of them.
There's a bunch of them. There's one is in a Google shared operation in California. There's a couple over in NASA, in Houston. There's a bunch of the D-Wave style machines that were the early precursors along the east coast of the United States, and one in Canada. As far as I know, there's 7 in the EU.
Do you believe that we are in a holographic program?
Yes, but I don't think it's meaningful. I don't think it's in any way different than reality. I think here's what I think reality is. Okay, I think that reality exists from this pulse. The pulse comes out, it goes through the entire material universe as we understand it, and it does so without any time at all because time is not defined for the pulse. But from our perspective, this pulse happens 22 trillion times a second, and there's a pause 22 trillion times a second. The pulse is when we're awake and moving, and the pause we don't even perceive, and that is what allows us to move because of the way that all the atoms are all connected. Atoms don't even really exist. The pulse is just atoms are just the nexus of all of the pulse running into itself, crashing back and forth into itself, creating all these little points of complexity. And so the pulse creates all these bazillions upon bazillions, an uncalculable number of points of complexity as it crashes in on itself. And because our minds only operate at about 60 frames a second maximally, we only see solid matter. Because we have within our minds our bodies as solid matter, when they reach out and touch something, and because their sensors work at such a slow level and not 22 trillion times a second, we can never touch anything when it is not there. Ergo, we think the universe is solid. How is that different from a holographic thing? There's no computer behind it. There's no big laser doing it. There's no man in a little sky machine up there causing all this to occur. But the net effect, as far as our consciousness is concerned, is the same. It might as well be a holograph, or a holodeck like in Star Trek, because we could never ever tell the difference once it gets over about 8 trillion times a second. Our ability to measure things is really about that level. So anything beyond that, we're going to assume as solid matter because we can't catch it in any of the other states. And we know what I'm saying is true because we now know that we've caught water in more than one form of fluid state. And we've caught it because we could look a little bit faster than we had been able to before.
So who created the pulse?
The pulse is self-creating. There is no who behind it. You have to understand that there is nothing other than consciousness, okay? There is no differentiation between solid matter and consciousness. We know this. How do we know this? Because we use consciousness to perceive solid matter. And it's all internal. So if matter actually existed, it would be immaterial to us, joke there, but it wouldn't matter to us because our consciousness is what is perceiving it. So if I trick my fingers by touching something and my fingers tell my consciousness it's solid, then it is solid. And it need not have a who or a personality behind it. A personality only exists within this materium where we've sliced our consciousness up into little tiny chunks and call them Bob and Steve and Clif, right? That kind of thing. Okay, so if we didn't slice our consciousness up into little tiny chunks, we wouldn't perceive ourselves this way, but it might be kind of boring. We wouldn't have anybody to talk to. We'd just be us, one big thing. And so that's sort of fundamentally what's going on. We are the who that has created the pulse because consciousness is that pulse. It's really, really goofy to think about from this side of the death barrier.
That's, what, that is a conversational piece for in the pub, a few beers.
I think either more than a few, or one is not enough, and 1,000 is, or 1,000 is not enough, and one's too many.
That's definitely a sit down with a point and to talk about it. We've got more questions for you there, Clif. Steve.
We do. I've got a quick fire these. Tommy was wondering, can you please ask Clif if the trouble in Qatar is related to them not accepting the petrodollar any longer and sliding towards the BRICS countries for energy trade?
That's one of the manifestations, but it's a minor one. It has very little to do with that. That's one of the also ran potentials. People will cite those kind of things. But at its core, what we're looking at here is the inability of Islam to continue under its current course. Why it's coming at this particular time may have to do with the unknown energies from space that are affecting humans. And thus, because we're all jittery, we're expressing it this way. And so finally, the constraints that have been pushing on the Islamic world based on their structure are coming to a head. You have to understand that Islam is different than most other religions in that it has a codicil in it that says that Muhammad is the last prophet, which basically means that you can never reform Mohammedanism. And yet it is in desperate need of reformation because the Wahhabites, who are basically, who are in fact despised by the vast majority of regular people in the Islamic world, have gotten way out of hand, and the Wahhabites are a danger to themselves and others, and therefore the pressures in Islam have got to explode at this point, and they've got to deal with it. Qatar, Saudi Arabia are deep in the Wahhabi issues. Saudi Arabia doesn't exist without Wahhabism. It helped form Saudi Arabia, and yet it was a terrible, bloody part of their history where they had the Brits come on in and kill hundreds of thousands of Wahhabi warriors just because they couldn't control them. And it was all over the king wanting mod cons, back in the 20s. So that's what's going on. It's a religious battle. If our data sets are correct, it's going to erupt. It's going to get incredibly bloody, and when it's all over, Mecca will be basically a smoking heap. And then thereafter, who knows how Islam will define itself with that central pillar gone.
There's an awful lot of talk about this year being very, very special, 2017, and forecasts for September, October for this year, what's going on. What's your data sets coming up with for this year?
That's pretty spot on. It is key. The data sets don't tell us why. I've got some reasons for thinking that it has to do with the alignments of Saturn and Jupiter and how they pull on our orbit, and again, some of the unknown energies from space.
That's the 23rd of September, yeah? That's the alignment, yeah.
Yeah, September and October are going to be very interesting because we've got this eclipse this year. We've got all this seismic activity. The alignment of the Saturn and Jupiter also pulls on our planet and causes a great amount of earthquakes, which also liberates other kinds of energies, which gets everybody jumpy, etc. So you can certainly see it at that level. But also we have the echoes of the past. We're over 100 years since the formation of the Federal Reserve in the United States and the beginning of this paper experiment. We're at the end of the death of the dollar that was created by Richard Nixon when he took us off the gold standard in 1972. Most currencies don't last as long as the dollar has. It's way old, way long in the tooth. It's dying, as we're seeing with the cryptocurrencies. So all kinds of things are coming to a head. And then we, of course, have the rigidification of thought, and the many people are responding to the emotional energies from space at a hormonal level and are not thinking, and thus are simply reacting. And so we've got all of that going on as well. Now, picking out any particular date is going to be probably less than useful, but alignments are certainly key for us, and week ahead and then thereafter. So I suspect that September is going to be rocky, to say the least. Our data sets have actually had 2017 as being a definitive year, a temporal marker year, in the sense that 2 years from now or 3 years from now, people will be able to look back and say, it all began in the summer of 17.
Yeah, because we've heard for the last few years, it's September, and every time September comes around, nothing happens. So we're hearing people again saying September again. Now, we do know about if we look at the facts, we know the banking system is, a lot of banks are trading insolvent. 2008 was just a hiccup compared to what they're saying is going to happen. If the derivatives market goes bang, which is probably the first one to go, the futures market, then the whole house of cards is going to collapse. And whether we have massive inflation, or it's going to be a societal, upset, and, this is why the millionaires and billionaires are buying the land, in New Zealand, or getting the silos. All this is kind of talked about, but at the moment, the banks cannot keep doing quantitative easing.
Sure they can. Sure they can.
So you think they're going to carry on printing and printing and printing?
Here, let's sketch it out for people, okay? It's not going to be the kind of collapse that doom porn kind of guys are saying. The banks won't collapse, and then one day you get up and nothing works. That might happen in locales, but it's not going to be that way globally, because there's billions of people out there, out of our population, that are working every day to keep the system afloat and functioning. As the old system dies, a new one is being born as we're here. As we're speaking now, there's people out there working they're sweating, they're drinking bad coffee and eating yesterday's pizza, trying to get code done this morning for this new development of our new economy, the new software economy. What you're looking at is basically the old system of material things dying, and a new dynamic that is emerging, that's based around software eating money, the way that software ate traffic control lights, the way that software ate the air traffic control system. When each and every one of these things happen, you see a disruption. We didn't see it with the traffic control lights much because we weren't involved in that world. We did see it here in the United States when the air traffic controllers were all fired, and most of them were replaced with software. And so we've seen this progression. And so it's going to continue on this way. So we won't have a major collapse, and everybody around the world says, now we got to fix it. No, what's going to happen is that it's collapsing and crumbling continuously, and there are people in there working like mad to try and prop it up, but then there's other guys that are working just as mad to build the thing that's going to replace it. And so eventually we'll just stop propping it up, and everybody will move over into whatever the replacement is. And that's the way we're going to build sci-fi world. So as the automobile dies, we're going to find that there's more and more people producing flying cars of some form that don't use an internal combustion engine, and so on. And it's a natural way that humans work. So it's more like, the concept of anti-fragile, of continual repair, means you're never really subject to a total catastrophe. The worst that could happen is that part of it breaks, but you've gotten really good at fixing it or building a new one. And so this is really an exciting time if you want to think about it. There's a lot of doom porn in the let's say the new age and the woo-woo world, right? And it's all misplaced, and it's guiding a lot of people away from what could be an extremely exciting time and participation in the new emerging science and software-based economies and world that's going on out there. There are people that will make millions of dollars millions of pounds in new profits over these next 2 weeks. And they will do so because of this new economy being born right now, and they happen to be right there. And in a sense, it's kind of like a gold rush, only we're not out digging with shovels and this kind of stuff, and your gold is digital, and your shovel is a compiler, a software compiler, and a good idea. But that's your only limitation. You don't even have to get to Alaska to dig this gold out. You can do it from Bangladesh or Zambia or, Dublin. And you could be a homeless kid in Dublin with a phone who figures out a decent idea for an app and teaches himself a rudimentary JavaScript enough to go use it as a demo to get somebody to back him. And it just goes that rapidly.
It's like
it's like
a 21st century industrial revolution. But,
correct. And it's not even industrial. It's something beyond that.
But what happens to people's jobs?
They disappear. So they better figure out a new way of doing stuff, because they're going to be replaced by robots and smart this and smart that. Just like the poor fellow that had a job lugging ice up those stairs to put into the ice boxes was replaced by the smart ice box, which was the refrigerator. So stuff like this happens all the time. This is why we are adaptable and can learn even at an old age, because we can learn. We should do it. And it's not that difficult. It takes a while to get your head wrapped around the words, but that's really your limitation, is that you don't understand the context in which people use words like TCP or IP or crypto or something like this. Once you grasp the context in which these words are starting to make sense to you, then you know you're on that path and you can master this. And it's my way of thinking, and maybe I'm arrogant. Okay, maybe I'm just really a nasty, rude, arrogant bastard, but it's my way of thinking that if one human did it, it may take me some time, but I can figure out how to do it too. That, we're basically all as stupid as each other. And so I can be as stupid as anybody else and learn my way through anything. And so far it's proven its way in the real world. And so I'm, basically someone says to me, blah, blah, I can't. It's like, okay, yeah, you just said you can't and therefore you won't. The minute you say I can, then you will, so fine, we got something to talk about.
But it shouldn't be just focused on technology. Surely, we have to look at the new industrial age, but not just technology, but other kind of sciences out there and other things that people can do as well.
There's an issue, okay? Yes, you don't have to look at it as just technology, but that's the underpinning. And it's the underpinning because we've hit this energy wall. Until we get some new form of energy that replaces oil pretty ubiquitously around the planet, we're in a dying energy environment. In that environment, you cannot afford to promote the idea that you can effectively hire 99,000 art historians this year. They're not contributing to getting that energy equation. And so, no, we can't afford to hire the 99,000 art historians, and maybe 45 or 50,000 of them should go be janitors, because we really need somebody to clean up, but we don't need more history about art. So we're at that point in history, where the species is under these pressures. Whenever the species has been put under these pressures, certain behavioral changes take place. Those behavioral changes are manifesting themselves all around us and trying to be suppressed by the powers that be, because they're inimical to the powers that be lifestyle. They don't want to suffer. The powers that be don't want to be relegated to a back position by the burgeoning of the new century here, where the common man has the power to do all of this kind of stuff, and they are no longer powerful simply because they have currency, debt-based money, and so they're very worried about this. But at the same time, it's a renaissance. It's a huge opening for all of us if you can open your mind up. But unfortunately, the universe is harsh. And if you can't, then you're going to have to face an increasingly difficult struggle going forward. And it's not to say that there aren't things that are extremely useful that are not technical. There are. But we have to be really specific about saying that, yes, this is practical. I can do this, and it will result in some gain, and the universe will reward me for that value, because that's what it's come down to. We can't afford. The paper debt system dies in its last gasp. It got so exuberant, we thought we could afford to hire 99,000 art historian teachers when we only need 2.
Well, I'm glad you said that. We're coming to the end of the interview, but I'm glad you said that, because time banking is catching on, and time banking is all about your energy and sharing your energy. And offering your skills that you can offer. And it doesn't have to be a trade, but just a skill. And we're seeing more and more. I've got information here I'll be reading out later regarding time banking in Ireland. But we know in America and the UK, time banking is taken off big time. And I think people have to be looking at time banking, which is a form of bartering. Are you bartering your energy? Because if the financial system goes down or it changes in some way, then you need to have a skill or an ability or something that's valuable that you can trade. And being a commodities broker in your neighbourhood is not going to get you nothing.
Yes, yes.
You
will be commensurately rewarded. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you have to get, you have to get practical, and you have to start looking at what your skill set is and what value can you bring to the community and people around you, and that's going to be your currency. Maybe it could be short term, could be long term, but I think it's going to be that's what people need to look at. But I'll tell you one thing. Oh, last minute question for Clif before we wind things up. Okay, Steve?
Yeah, we have the very last question of the evening from Dave. Dave says, for Clif, what's your view on the stability of cyber currencies? And does the high buy-in price of one Bitcoin limit its growth and therefore increase the chances of other cyber currencies taking a larger share?
Exactly. Let's take it from that and proceed back. Dave's quite correct. The other cyber currencies will take another existing share, but it's not going to reduce Bitcoin. Bitcoin's function is a store of wealth, and the entree into the cyber world, you need a Bitcoin in order to buy Ethereum. You need Ethereum to buy into these others, and it just goes from there. Bitcoin's function is not depreciated by the larger capital market, it's merely enhanced. So before it was a currency, now it's going to end up being a store of wealth and a sovereign or large corporation settlement vehicle, and we'll use Litecoin, Ethereum, and some of these other coins as our actual day-to-day kind of currency. So it's all shaking out just as it should.
Okay, brilliant stuff. Well, Clif, thanks a lot for coming on. Really enjoyed the chat. Great information there. Loads for people to actually go back and listen to the interview again, because we bounced around everywhere, which is great when you can do that. Much appreciated for you coming on. We'll definitely do a part 3 if you're up for that in a few months' time. We'll see where we are then, maybe around September, October time. But we're going to pass you off to Steve. Steve's going to get all your contact details and where people can find you. Steve.
Yeah, great information, Clif. A lot of people chatting amongst themselves, talking about this information on the chat rooms there. So you've definitely whetted some appetites. Half Past Human is your website there for anyone who wants to check out that. Some great information on there. We have put it in the chat room here and also on People's Internet Radio. In closing, Clif, are there any other links that you want to throw out there for the audience this evening?
No, but if they want to follow me on Twitter at Clif_high, so CLIF_HIGH. I do put out updates as I'm going through the data occasionally, and it's just pertinent, but I wouldn't get it into a report. And so that would be the place to look for that.
Okay.
Brilliant stuff.
Twitter, we're still learning how to tweet.
Yeah, we're working on it. We're working on it. Okay, Clif, just stay with us there. We're just going to go off to a musical break, and we'll be back after this.
This is Open Your Mind Radio on OYMradio.com and peoplesinternetradio.com.
Oh,
that was quite sudden.
That was a very sudden ending. Yeah, halfpasthuman.com is Clif's website. A lot of great information there, and do follow him on Twitter if you understand that technology. It is beyond me. I don't know why people do it. I really don't. Anyway.
It's no, we're supposed to have a guest on from the Basis Conference called Dr. Mary
Helen Hensley?
Helen Hensley. And, and we had arranged for her to be on, and she's not online there, so I don't know what happened there. We'll have to find out. Maybe she had an emergency or something, so I'm not too sure what happened there, but there you go. That's just the way it works. I'm sure we'll probably get her on next week. We'll see what happens anyway. Right, just a couple of things, as usual, at the end of the show that we'll touch base on. Now, just talking about time banking, last year we had a guy on called Jasper, and he is an English chap who's down in the south of Ireland, in around Cork, I think, and he's doing some sterling work regarding time banking, and he sent us over an email.
Is that a joke? Sterling? Sterling work?
Sterling work. Yeah, there was a pun there. I didn't even realise that. That's good. God, I'm so sharp, I could cut myself. Right, okay. If I realised it. Right, okay. So he says he sent us an email and he said, we have just launched a new time bank in West Cork. The website address will change next week, but anybody can find us by typing into Google West Cork Skills Exchange. We already have over 100 members and are getting new applications coming in at a good rate. Also, Time Banking Ireland are looking for anyone across the country who may be looking to set up a time bank in their area to get in touch. We can provide the same software that is being used by over 40,000 time banking members in the UK. Anyone can contact us about either Time Banking Ireland or the West Cork Skills Exchange by emailing us at exchangemembers@gmail.com. Now, we've talked about time banking before, and it's all about energy and using your labour. Ubuntu Ireland is the same principle, a bit more an advanced version of time banking, but the principles are the same. And we are trying to promote time banking because if the system does collapse, at least you have something organised in your community. If you're in a position that you don't have a lot of money but you have a lot of time, which is a lot of people in Ireland at the moment, then give up your time and trade your time for other skills. I mean, you might need to get your car fixed. There might be a mechanic in the time banking system where he will do the work for free, but you have to pay for the parts. It might be a painter and decorator, whatever, whatever your skill is. Now, people have said to me before, I've looked into time banking, and they said, well, I've no skill. Well, I'll give you an example. There was a paraplegic person who was in the time banking system. And somebody will say, well, how the hell can a paraplegic actually be in time banking when all they can do is move their head? Well, apparently the person could speak fluent French. So what they did was they taught French as part of the time banking scheme, and in return they got work done around the house. So everybody can get involved with the time banking system. And for people who will argue the point, what if a brain surgeon wants to come in and he values his time more than the person next door who's just going to do a bit of childminding? Well, to be honest with you, if you're going to come in with that attitude, then you're better off not joining the time bank. You only put in what you want to do for the time bank. Just because you can do brain surgery doesn't mean you should offer it in the time bank. 1 hour is 1 hour and that's it. If you don't want to offer brain surgery because you find it's too expensive and you can't offer that, don't. Offer to cut somebody's grass. Okay, so that's how you do it. No arrogance involved with time banking. I mean, an hour is an hour and that's the way it works. It doesn't matter whether you're a solicitor or you have you're a scientist. Just offer the skill that you're prepared to do for the hour. It's as simple as that.
But a lot of people don't realise that listening is the skill.
Yeah,
just
totally.
Listening to someone. Someone may have some problems that they can't talk to friends or family members, but they could talk to you as part of the time bank in confidence, and that's all you need to do is just listen. Just be an ear. Listen to them, because you know yourself. Sometimes people, if they have someone to talk to, just to listen to them. Sometimes just by speaking to someone else about a problem, you come to the solution yourself anyway.
I was in the men's shed. I go down to the men's shed now on a regular basis.
He does indeed.
I'm doing some work down there for them at the moment. I'm making up a bench. Sorry, that's our guest Mary, but unfortunately it's too late. Sorry, Mary. We're finishing up now. Basically, can you just let her know there, Steve? Thanks. With the time banking, but one of the lads in the men's shed said to me that they were talking, this group was talking, and he said the highlight of the week was when he went shopping and he was having a conversation with the cashier. That was his highlight of the week. So as Steve said, maybe just talking to somebody who's lonely is part of the time banking that you could offer. So everybody has a skill. So I just think it's important. The other thing on the list is, I put up information on Facebook there the other day regarding democracy and about how much of it is an illusion and how it works. And a few people clicked on it. But if you put up something silly like the cat running out the door in a funny way, everybody clicks on it. And I'm just amazed at how the unimportant things in life get more clicks than the things that are quite serious. So I don't really know where society is going. But there you go. That's just the way it is. Now, Steve's going to tell us about the Bases Conference anyway.
Yes, I am. The Ireland Awakens Conference, it's in conjunction with Miles Johnson's Bases project. It's going to be taking place in the Talbot Hotel, Stillorgan, on the weekend of Friday, Saturday and Sunday. That's the 15th, 16th and 17th of September. Put that in your diary. The 3-day event will comprise of 16 national and international speakers, covering a wide range of subjects, such as UFOs, alien abductions, controlled remote viewing, sacred sites, the elite, mind control, ritual child abuse, and many, many more. One of the main reasons for the conference is to get up-to-the-minute new information from an Irish perspective and get that out into the public domain. We're also very excited that, as well as Miles Johnson speaking here in Ireland for the first time in many years, Kerry Cassidy from the Project Camelot will be giving a presentation on both Saturday and Sunday. And both Alan and I will be there on the Saturday, dressed up to the nines in our tins and fruits, suited and booted, or probably just jeans and t-shirts. So we'll be there as well, giving our talk. We'll probably have to dress up for it. I'll have to iron a shirt.
I don't know.
I'll have to buy a shirt.
We might put a shirt on or something like that. Look nice rather than just being in there swimming togs here, you know.
Oh well, we are in the OYM jacuzzi. I was actually just thinking recently about September when we went to see David Icke. He was there and he kind of had a short, and it wasn't a fancy short. The short was kind of open and he had some nice pair of trousers on. I'm thinking that could be the way to go.
Yeah, just relaxed, and comfortable. We have to be comfortable. Now, I just want to touch base on something that we said at the start of the show regarding the 5G networks. Check it out, what's going on with the 5G network. And obviously, if you want to check out APRS and CB radio as a potential, now I know it's not as good as a mobile phone, but you have to look at the dangers and the potential risks of 5G and what they're trying to do. It's called the Internet of Everything, where they're trying to make everything go on a mesh, on a grid, and linked by the internet. I mean, it's getting to be unbelievable, the technology they're rolling out, and people will be affected by this. So it's quite scary. The movie The Kingsman, if you haven't seen the movie The Kingsman, is quite interesting because they give out free mobile phone SIMs to the world. Everybody gets them, and they actually use that frequency in the mobile phones used to actually control people. And we know that can be done because they've used the Tetra network with the Gardaí. We've had Barry Trower on the show confirming that and saying that the Tetra network, the frequency that works on, makes people more violent. So imagine if they did that with the 5G. And the fact they're using the 5G frequency as crowd control as well, which is a bit of a concern. So it's something to keep in mind. I'd like to see us try and get away from the technology as much as we can and using, as I say, CBR amateur radio as a potential. If there's something out there that's better, then happy days. But with CB and amateur radio, you don't need to have a network. And the amateur radio network system over here of repeaters is up and running at the moment. So if myself and Steve have time, because we are involved in a lot of projects, but if we have time, we will look into APRS and do some experimenting and maybe do a video and explain it and show it working. It's a little kind of a home project for myself and Steve because we're into that technology.
As he says, looking at me. Yeah, we are. Little experimenters in our spare time. Actually, we've got a minute to kill. We've got a minute to kill, I suppose. So I was going to tell a little story, but I won't because we haven't got that much time. There are a lot of, we have done some videos from time to time. Do have a look at the OYM YouTube channel because there are some kind of fun videos on there. There's some serious stuff and there's little kind of fun little projects that we've kind of done as well. If it's driving in a car at 60 miles an hour with a fan held out the window, we've done it.
We've done it.
But, kind of cool little videos. And if you have any ideas for videos that you'd like us to do or, consider doing, send them to us as well.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I did do the Spooky 2 video, so if you want to know about the Spooky 2, pop over to YouTube. I've done a beginner's guide, so to give you an idea. But we better go. From myself, Alan James, take it easy. Have a good week. Next week, we have Mick from Liffey Sound FM and Trevor from Open Mind Conference. So we'll chat to you then. Bye-bye.
Okay, it's been a great show. The 2 hours have flown by. Stay tuned if you're on People's Internet Radio. Vin is up next. We're going to sever the stream on OYM, and the podcast should be done very shortly. For anyone who missed the beginning of the show, it should be up very, very soon. So until the same time next week, from myself, Stephen George, take care. Bye-bye.